If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up during the middle of the night? So when I was pretty young, maybe 13, my family went to this flea market to find a hutch for my bedroom. We happened to find this really neat gigantic bamboo hutch I really liked. My dad haggled with the guy for a bit on the price, and soon we're loading up this behemoth on the roof of our SUV. As we're strapping it on top, the dealer says casually, not like he's trying to scare us, that the hutch was previously owned by a witch/Wiccan or something. He wished us good luck and walked away. My family, being the naive people we are, didn't really think too much about it, and drove home. It took us a bit to unload it and haul it up the stairs into my bedroom, where I proudly placed my aquarium on top of. Do you ever wake up because you thought you felt movement near you? Like a presence was really close to you. The first night having this hutch in my room, I woke because I had that feeling. I'm a pretty easily frightened kind of guy, especially at that age, so it took me a good hour to fall asleep again. In that hour under the covers, I swear I heard quiet breathing under/around my bed. Eventually, I fall back asleep. I don't know how long it was until I woke up again, but this time that feeling of movement wasn't the only thing that happened. I wake up, and sit straight up in my bed as if to conquer the fear I was surely hallucinating. I fucking see something. In the corner of my vision I see something about the size and shape of a small child on all fours scramble under and around my bed. I dove under my covers and it kept making noises. I could hear it scurrying like a loud cockroach, and it sounded like nails scraping the floor. I screamed, and 10 seconds later my mom and dad burst in the door. I didn't see them at first, since I was under the covers, but when they pulled down the covers I saw my dad look distracted and pale. I sobbed to them what I saw. Mom was supportive but skeptical, but Dad spoke up. This leaves tonight. He starts to move the hutch alone, and my mom, bewildered, begins to help. They spend 15 minutes getting this thing down the stairs and out into the driveway at 3 a.m. Dad comes back inside, and tries to calm me down. I just didn't want you to be scared anymore, he said. But I saw his eyes. He saw it too. Something I can actually answer to. Okay, so we live in an average-sized city. Back then we lived a 5-minute drive from the city center. Right on the opposite side of the street was a school. It was closed for lack of students maybe 2 to 3 years prior to my, experience. So anyway, cue a winter night in 2011 or so. It was the middle of the night, 2 or 3 a.m. I usually have a deep sleep and only wake up when shit goes down, or when my little sister cried at night. That night, I woke up from a loud rustling outside. I sleep with my windows open all year round. Sounded like it was coming from the school. I look out but see nothing at first. Windows are all intact and dark. No one's there. I wanted to close the curtain and go back to sleep when I hear a noise again. I look to the schoolyard's gate. There's a street light right next to it. I see a figure, human-sized, climbing over the gate and onto the street. Didn't see his face. Or its. It was walking on all fours. Naked. Once it was past the gate it hightailed across the street. It was insanely fast. Was walking faster on all fours than I could at full sprint. Never had sleep paralysis or any surreal experiences. The most surreal thing I ever encountered, besides that day, was fresh footprints in an abandoned bunker me and friends were exploring. No big deal. It was sealed since the reunification and we broke the damn seal ourselves. I was shocked but way too tired. I thought I was either still half asleep and hallucinating or it was a meth head who thought he was a wolf. Didn't think any of it. That is. Until I told my then girlfriend. In our street there was an old playground. She was there sometimes with her friends, often until it got dark. I told her what I saw and she looked at me like I offended her ancestors. Was it walking on all fours? She had asked. I'll be damned, I thought. I wasn't hallucinating then. It kinda looked like the Spaniards from the bunker chapter in Uncharted 1 if anyone ever played that. Just more. Naked. And fleshy. Not gray. Human. But if I remember correctly, abnormally long arms. Anyway, not saying it was a Wendigo. I stick to my meth head theory, but if other people have seen something similar, I'm intrigued. When I was about 10, I went with my parents to stay in this cabin in the mountains in North Carolina. The cabin was beautiful, however, it was 2-story and the staircase was outside. Also, the owner asked us to feed his cat, for which the food was kept in a plastic, hard-to-open barrel. Anyways, because I was so old then, I wanted to sleep on the top floor by myself. My parents said it was fine and that I should just stomp on the floor if anything was wrong during the night. Well, one of the nights, I heard something that sounded like someone breaking in and totally freaked out, especially because I was by myself. Started stomping on the floor that my parents thought there was a herd of elephants above them. They came up, didn't see anything, but because I was so freaked out, I went to sleep in the bed with my mom downstairs and my dad took the bed upstairs. Well, I guess in the middle of the night, he too heard something. He went to investigate and the burglar was actually a raccoon that had broken into the cabin. It took off a screen on the door, and was now rolling the barrel of cat food around the floor, trying to open it. Was up blasting music at about 3 a.m. drinking by myself. I live in the country, so it's all rich snobs' cottages and empty forests, so nobody around. I go to watch a movie and turn off my stereo, and as I did I heard footsteps somewhere in my house. Not light but like a work boot, I drunkenly grabbed the most weapon-y thing I had, which was a pocket knife, and go running out. For some ungodly reason there was a deer in my kitchen. Just standing there. It had somehow gotten in somewhere, but the thing is that everything was locked. I was somewhere between 7 and 12 years old, maybe 9 or 10, and I think I had the flu or some kind of fever. I went to bed, but then woke up with this horrible feeling. It's hard to even describe to this day, but it's like all my senses went into hyperdrive in an absolutely horrific way. It was similar to the feeling where your foot goes numb, but instead of pins and needles, it's this physical sensation of violent shaking or vibrating. And it was all over my body, from head to toe, and from my skin down to my core. And it wouldn't stop. At first it was annoying, but then I started getting scared, and soon I couldn't move without feeling like I was going to explode. It almost felt like an electric current somehow, not painful, but paralyzing and terrifying. The more I moved, the more it got worse. If I tried to roll over, it felt like any part of my body that touched my blankets or my bed was vibrating 100 times a second. So for what felt like an hour, I just laid frozen in bed, feeling like I was shaking or being electrocuted. I could move, and I did try rolling around to make it stop, but it kept getting worse and worse. Finally I couldn't take it anymore and tried to sit up, and it actually felt like I was being shocked to death in my entire body. I managed to get out of bed, and every time I took a step, I thought I was dying. I made it into my mom's bedroom and tried to wake her up, but I couldn't speak, then apparently fainted and landed hard on her floor. She freaked out and lifted me into her bed, and then I woke up and the feeling stopped, but I was still shaky. I'm pretty sure she rushed me to the doctor, but I don't remember anything else. I couldn't describe it to her back then, but I said it felt like my body was fighting itself. In hindsight, it was like I had a million extra sensors in every part of my body and they all got turned up to 100. I felt like my body was huge and I was floating inside it, and every time a part of my body touched anything, it was like my brain thought it tripled in size and started buzzing so violently that I could barely walk. It had to have been the fever, but I just can't put it into words. I've had some other weird ones since. Nightmares of hearing a loud noise like a gunshot or explosion, then waking up disoriented and thinking I was going to die. Usually just some car being loud outside and causing a sudden nightmare. But nothing is like that weird night I had when I was a kid, and what's worse is I still don't know what it was. Loosely related story time. One time I went camping with my family, wife and 2 small kids. At the time digital cameras were kind of a new thing and we had one along with us. This was hiking backcountry camping. Not really hardcore, it was only a few miles from the parking lot, but just explaining the situation. We set up, do dinner, etc., then string our food in a bag up a bear pole. If you aren't aware, a bear pole is a tall pole, in this case metal, with another long stick, again metal, to use to hang you food from. Bears can't get to it and they'll probably leave you alone too. Anyhow, food is hung up, I'm snuggled in with my family and go to sleep. Next thing I know I'm woken up by a thunderstorm. Normally I would think this was pretty cool, I like storms, but it suddenly occurred to me that I think I put the camera in the not waterproof at all food bag. I search around the tent a bit, trying not to wake anyone, and I can't find it. So, out I go into the storm. It's pitch black outside, great movie by the way, I didn't have my glasses on either, and the only light I get to see the end of the pole to hook the food bag happens to be from lightning. Well, after about 3 lightning strikes I finally hook it. I get the bag down and do a quick search in the dark, but I don't find the camera. At this point I think screw it and I just put the food bag outside, but under the canopy of the tent. I try to go back to bed, but the storm has more or less stopped and now all I hear are what could be rain dripping from tree leaves or it could be footsteps of animals. I just laid there stressed for the rest of the night. No bear ever came. Camera was in the tent the whole time. We'll never forget this. I was staying at a family member's house, alone, for a few days to dog sit. The town where my family member lives is a very isolated and small woodsy town. One of the nights, probably around 3 a.m., I woke up to a distant sound of what sounded like a child screaming at the top of his/her lungs. This wasn't like a kid crying. It sounded like a kid was screaming like they were in pain or they were being chased, something out of a horror movie. So this started happening right, and it obviously woke me up because it was extremely loud, and it sounded like it was coming from next door, outside. These screams of horrific pain came in waves, and went on for a good 20 minutes. I was beyond terrified and I couldn't move from my bed. Now, I was dog-sitting 3 dogs. 2 of them had dog beds in the room, and one of them slept with me in the bed under the covers. All 3 of them heard these screams as well. The one in the bed with me immediately wiggled between my legs and was frozen in place, just like I was. One of the 2 dogs laying in its bed heard the noise and immediately ran downstairs and out back through the doggy door and started barking really loudly at the noise we were all hearing. The other dog stayed back, presumably shitting itself. Anyway, I'm laying there having no idea what's going on as these shrieks from what I believe is a child, outside next door, and one of the dogs out back barking, are ongoing. I had so many questions. Why is this happening? Where is this child's parents? Am I dreaming? Am I about to be murdered by a demon? I was freaking out. After the 20 minutes passed, the sound of the screaming stopped, as well as the barking. The dog came back in after the screaming stopped. And I'm just laying there confused and scared. Eventually I was able to fall back asleep, but it was very difficult. I told my family member what had happened when they returned, and we guessed it was a neighbor's kid who was having issues all night, but it didn't quite add up. Truthfully, they had no idea what it could have been. A few months passed and I checked back. We still fully don't know what it was, but they came up with a theory that it was a deer that was hurt or screaming for its family or something. It sounded reasonable, but we couldn't be certain. Either way, those noises really sounded horrific and like it was from a scary movie, and I was scared shitless. I will never forget that night. It was sleep paralysis for me. I was about 17 years old and my girlfriend at the time was spending the night with me. As the night turns late, we go to bed and quickly fall asleep. Then, in the middle of the night, my girlfriend wakes me up as she gets out of bed. I'm laying on my left side. "I'm going to get some water," she says. She opens my door and walks out without closing it. Mind you, this house I used to live in had a vaulted ceiling outside my room, so there was always a massive black expanse outside my room, just pure blackness. I realize I can't really move at all. I jokingly think, what if I'm in sleep paralysis? I realize then and there, I am. And that's when I feel it. I felt an ice-cold hand with long sharp fingers clutch onto my right shoulder. I feel this sensation run throughout my whole body. A cold sensation, a sensation that demanded my attention and my whole being. When it touched me, that was the only time I had any control of my body, and all I could do was let out a shallow wheeze as it gripped me and began to slowly pull me. It pulled me slowly onto my back, and I knew it did this so I could witness this demon with my eyes. Complete paralysis now. At this point I'm so terrified. I'm trying with all my might to thrash around, to scream, to close my eyes, anything, but my body does not respond. Soon, I see an amorphous pitch black figure with sharp glowing red eyes and slow seething tentacle-like limbs slowly amassing into my room from the darkness beyond my open door. It just manifested from the darkness. The demon is staring right at me, approaching and invading my room with an absolute malevolence I cannot fathom. Its sole purpose was to destroy me, to destroy my spirit and soul. I felt that with absolute certainty. Pure, palpable evil. Nothing I can do is stopping it. It's come for me. That's when I noticed these orbs of gray shimmering liquid to my left, so I focused on these orbs that emitted a sense of absolute neutrality, and as I mentally focused on them, the demon halted in my periphery. It did not disappear, it did not look away, it simply stopped advancing. I'm praying and trying to scream out. Eventually, I feel my fingers twitch, then my shoulder. Then I can blink. The demon fades away slowly without ever breaking eye contact with me. Right on time, my girlfriend walks in with a cup of water and I gasp for air. She is startled and asks me what's wrong, and I tell her I had sleep paralysis. She lays down next to me, I roll to my left side again and I kiss her. Then, I roll over to my right. And she walks in again. I couldn't believe it. Am I really awake? At that time, I truly was. Never have I felt such intense fear my whole life. Haven't had sleep paralysis since. I was 8 years old at the time, and I woke up to a loud noise that came from the wardrobe. The noise was like someone hit his head against it or slammed it really hard. I freaked out and turned the lights on to check what was going on. And there was nothing. My brother, who is 3 years younger than me, and I were sleeping in the same room. And the weird thing is that he didn't wake up to the sound I heard. So, I turned off the lights and went back to bed thinking that I was just imagining things. I rolled to my right side facing my brother's bed. And I saw the weirdest thing I have ever seen in my life that still haunts me to this day after 15 years. There was a creature that looked like a gnome, standing on my brother's bed exactly behind him. My vision got clearer after my eyes got used to the dark. He was an arm's length tall and he had the scariest grin on his face. He kept looking at me and waving. Getting smaller in size with each second passing. He kept waving for a whole minute and getting smaller until he disappeared. I know this sounds made up. I don't know if was hallucinating or not that day. But since then I've been scared of the dark. People sometimes laugh at me for that, but they didn't see what I saw. I lived in a shared flat with 4 other girls. I came home from work late and fell asleep on the sofa in the living area. I knew that 3 of the girls were away as it was summer break, didn't know if my other flatmate was in. I heard a weird moaning noise like a classic fake ghost moan you hear in kids' cartoons. That woke me up. And I presumed someone was just watching a film. I sat up and was just looking at my phone, and then I hear a man shout, "Help! Help!" I got goosebumps right away, it sounded so realistic. Then again, "Help! Me!" And this is where I stood up and froze, and before I could finish my text to the flatmate, a text from her popped up. "Jess, did you hear that? Is that you?" I called her and basically was like, "WTF, no, I'm the kitchen, is anyone else back?" And she started crying and said no, she's been here on her own all day. We agreed she was going to open her door quickly, luckily she was the closest room to the kitchen. I got in and she was like a few years older than me and she was in absolute tears and said she had been hearing strange things. Now, this sound was definitely a man and we lived in an all-girls building. We heard this man getting angry, shouting unintelligibly apart from "Help me." It didn't sound like this man was in any trouble though, like it was some kind of trap. We called the police, who tried to brush it off as someone playing a prank, and we insisted we are pretty certain it isn't. I said I could climb out the window and let the police in, etc., and that's when they realized we were totally serious. I couldn't quite believe it, but they asked me to go out and see who it was. I protested, but they guided me on the phone to leave the bedroom. Looking back now, I don't know why really. My flatmate was sitting on the floor as white as a ghost, still shaking. Me being the hard little shit I am, opened the door and peered out, and as I did I saw this man, almost 7 foot tall, go out of our front door, the door slamming behind him. Should I have goosebumps again writing this? The police came but could not find any signs of forced entry. Me and my flatmate went back to our parents' houses for the rest of the summer. When I was still in high school, so I had the sleeping pattern of a drug addict, and one night as I'm drifting off to sleep, it was 3:13 a.m. when I last looked at my phone and rolled over to finally fall asleep, when I was woken up to what sounded like a goat being crushed by something, and I vividly remember hearing the bones crunch and air forced out of its lungs with each push. Naturally paralyzed by fear, I could not for the life of me look out the window out of fear of what I might see. For reference, I'm 290 pounds man and have lived in a remote community most of my life, so I'm very comfortably and experienced in the outdoors, as it's a way of life for me. Now, what scared me about this noise wasn't that it was something dying or even that it sounded to be just outside my bedroom window, but what scared me was that it sounded like a goat. I live in the far northern parts of Alberta, Canada. Goats don't live here, they're not natural, and nobody in this community owns goats. So my half-awake mind linked goats with the devil, since it would have been impossible for a goat to be anywhere near my property. After what felt like an hour of being petrified in the corner of my room, it stopped and I gained my courage. I grabbed the first thing within grasp, which was a baseball bat, and I walked into the living room to where my auntie was sleeping on the couch, as she normally falls asleep there watching TV at night. Still scared of what I heard and the fact it might come back, I woke her up. Without realizing, I started to shake her, saying, "Auntie, wake up, the devil's outside. Auntie, wake up, the devil's outside." She immediately sprung up in pure terror, because from her point of view she woke up to a 290 pounds man with a baseball bat in the pitch black of night saying the devil's outside. Needless to say, that was a very sleepless night. I have 2 complete opposite end of the spectrum wake-ups. Scary as in the sound of my 2-year-old gagging next to me in bed and waking up to a face full of projectile vomit. And scary as in the time I worked as a camp counselor in college. The boys' village and girls' village counselors would try out prank each other as the summer wore on. You could also rotate into the frontier village, which was set about a half-mile away from the main camp through the woods and had 0 electricity, and the cabins were the original wood 8-bunk cabins from when the camp was founded in 1937. I was in Frontier that week and sound asleep at about 3 a.m. The guy assigned to Frontier woke me up shaking my shoulder, saying one of his kids had gotten up to go to the bathroom and hadn't come back. Could I come help him look for him? I jumped out of bed and went running out of the cabin into the woods, where another of the guy counselors jumped out with a horrifying mask on and started up a chainsaw. I'm only slightly embarrassed by the sounds I emitted that night, and I honestly can't remember ever running so fast in my life. He won that prank, hands down, no contest. I jumped for years after whenever I was woken up at night, and had a hard time walking through the woods forever after in the dark. So my family has this shed in our backyard that my brothers and I converted into what we called a tiny house. We put a couple of mattresses in there and everything. During the summer my little brother would sometimes sleep out there by himself. We live in an okay, safe neighborhood so no one really cared. One night I was woken up by my phone getting a call from my little brother. I thought that's weird. It's 2 a.m. and he's just outside. I pick up and it just sounds like breathing. Okay, a little creepy, but he probably just dialed me by accident while he was asleep, so I brush it off and hang up. As soon as I hang up he calls again, and this time I can tell he's whispering and very scared. He's just frantically telling me to come outside quick and to get him. At this point I'm completely awake and jump from my bed and start loading my small .22 handgun that I had at the time. He tells me that there's someone trying to get in and is trying to open the locked door. Keep in mind that he's around 14 and isn't scared easily. Especially since he's stayed out there most of the summer already. So with my handgun I walk outside and walk over to the shed. No one in sight. I knock on the door and whisper to my brother that I'm here. He comes out. I take him inside. We lock the door. The house was unlocked so that my brother could come in the morning. And I checked the entire house to make sure that if there was anyone that they weren't inside. Nada. We think that it may have been a cat or something clawing at the door trying to get at the food my brother had in there, but the feeling I got when I heard how scared my little brother was still freaks me out sometimes. It's 3 a.m. and my girlfriend and I are asleep in our third-floor apartment. I wake up to a firm tapping on the window like someone is knocking on it. At first I thought I imagined until it started again. The curtains are closed so I can't see out, and I immediately begin imagining all manners of horrible shit that could be causing the sound. I'm trying to think of a logical explanation, but the nearest tree is 20 yards away, so the only thing it could be is a psycho on a 3-story ladder or Satan himself waiting to beckon me into the fiery depths of hell. It's very clearly the sound of knuckles tapping on the window. I get out of bed and grab a baseball bat as a pitiful stream of urine dribbles out of my fear-shrunken penis. As I reach to pull back the curtain I hear a high-pitched but soft sobbing sound like a small girl terrified for her life. I freeze before realizing it's me that's sobbing. The tapping begins again and I gather my last iota of courage and pull back the curtain while muttering a prayer to Buddha, Jesus, Vishnu, Muhammad, Thor, Cthulhu and all the various gods I can think of. My cat is sitting on the windowsill scratching his chin and his paw is hitting the window with the sound of tapping fingers on the glass. He yawns lazily and stares at me in stern disapproval as I fall to my knees crying with relief and thanking God for my deliverance. My sole consolation is my GF slept through the entire encounter. When I was little there was a 5-week period where I would wake up in my bedroom to find the back door to our house, connected to my bedroom, swinging in the wind. I would wake to see red glowing eyes floating and bobbing in sequence like an invisible person was walking around. I would pretend to be asleep too afraid to move but keep my eyes open just enough to see though my eyelashes. The glowing eyes would wander around my room for a while, occasionally stopping at the foot of my bed and staring me down for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Eventually it wanders through the other door into the rest of the house. Not every night but still repetitively a similar sequence of events would occur. Despite ensuring the doors were locked, even having stacked boxes and other obstacles did nothing to prevent this. Parents thought I was making shit up. Eventually I traded bedrooms with my little brother, and 1 week into the switch I hear my little brother crying to my parents late at night about a monster mentioned red eyes. Parents didn't believe him either. I shit you not, and this is all real, a man watching my roommate and I sleep. It happened a year ago and I can't really remember the details. For background information purposes I'd like to inform you all that I lived in a college town in the capital of Florida. I'm not sure why, but for reason I had gotten the strangest urge to sleep with my roommate/best friend that night and asked her if it was okay if we could do so, and she said yes. We had a nightly routine of making sure the front door was locked. I had woken up a couple of times throughout the night to get water from the Brita and always make sure to check if the door was locked, and every time it was. Around 6:30 a.m. my roommate's dog started growling and I immediately dismissed it since she occasionally does that when you kick her in your sleep. My roommate didn't dismiss this and decided to open her eyes, and to her surprise, she saw a man staring at us hunched up, almost as if he was going under the bed. At this point she accepted our fate, both small girls under 5'4", and sat upward on the bed, eventually making eye contact with the stranger in her room. He didn't harm us, he simply stood up and walked away. I hadn't opened my eyes until his figure was leaving the room. It was surreal having my best friend practically shaking me, telling me there was a man in the bedroom. We called the police and contacted our leasing office, and nothing really happened, which gave me such a false sense of security. We've both moved out of that area since then, and I would most definitely consider it one of the scariest moments of my life. I used to have a demon in my room. It would throw my shit at me while I was sleeping. I had a dresser next to my bed, and I would wake up all the time to my stuff being pushed onto the floor. At first I thought it was the ghost of my cat. That asshole did that shit all the time in the middle of the night. After I started waking up from stuff being thrown at my face, I quickly dropped that idea. That is when the night terrors and sleep paralysis started. I would have regular lucid hallucinations of snakes and rats climbing all over me. One time I had an extremely vivid one of a rat on my legs. I was awake enough this time to actually react, and I kicked it off of me. It was so real I am still not convinced as to whether it was or not. Anyways, after I threw it off, I looked down towards my closet where my laundry was, and there was a human-shaped thing crouched down next to my hamper. It was wearing my clothes and was staring at me. Then it was gone, like my eyes just stopped seeing it. I don't remember what happened, but next thing I knew I was running through the house looking in every nook and cranny and locking all the doors. Another time I was using sleep hypnotism videos to go to sleep, and I had an out-of-body experience. I was floating above me and I turned to look at myself, and there was a really tall, lanky, no-faced being standing over me, leaning over and whispering questions into my ear. I was answering them out loud and I woke up answering it. I was saying no in my normal speaking voice. In the morning I found the video, and at the end they were speaking to my ego and asking it questions. They were the same questions the thing was asking. I'd want to think of it, but I was really scared when I woke up. Was hiking with 4 friends and 2 dogs, and were staying in a lean-to. Weather was nasty and we'd hung a tarp across the front of the lean-to. The area we were camping in was notorious for bear activity, and I'd had a run-in about 10 years earlier with a bear trying to steal my backpack because I'd missed a stick of pepperoni in it. We'd also done all of our cooking that night in the lean-to because of how bad the weather was. Around 2 a.m., while I'm dreaming about bears, I feel something brush against me and wake up. The inside of the lean-to is complete and utter darkness, and I am convinced that a bear has rubbed against me while looking for food. So I do the calm and reasonable thing and yell to scare the bear away. I, not actually awake yet, decided that bear inside would be the appropriate way to scare off the bear. This was absolutely the correct choice, as it both woke up my friends and alerted them to the presence of the bear. Pandemonium ensues as half of them try to jump out of the lean-to while still in their sleeping bags, while the other half try to kick the bear out of the lean-to, also while still in their sleeping bags, all the while emitting shrieks of unadulterated terror. Eventually one of them thrashed around enough to disturb the tarp and allowed just enough light into the lean-to for everyone to realize that there was no bear inside. The dog slept through the entire incident. The Friday night after 9/11, around 2 in the morning, I was still up screwing around on the internet. Probably porn, or forums for Halo, can't remember. When out of nowhere, the windows lit up with the craziest greenish/white light, followed by an explosion that left my ears ringing, and my vision temporarily spotty. Then the power went out. My dad came flying down the stairs in his underwear, baseball bat and flashlight in hand, and asked me what heel it was. Being half blind and half deaf, I struggled to understand what he was saying. By this point the whole family was awake, and my mom was frantically ripping stuff out of the hall closet to get to the crawl space. We grew up in a different area known for tornadoes, so to her it was the safest place in the house. My dad and I decided to go outside and see what was up, found the entire neighborhood outside, just as confused as us. Some of the guys had their hunting rifles out, convinced that we were under attack. Seeing firearms in public was weird because we live in Canada. So I'm talking to friend, and we both agreed that attacking a small rural Canadian town probably wasn't happening. About an hour later everyone has calmed down, and we're trying to find a rational explanation to the explosion, when we see a caravan of headlights slowly making its way down the street, which made the parents more paranoid, thinking it's the military, or worse. It was BC Hydro. The transformer on the pole outside my house had exploded. The looks on the face of the Hydro crew was a mixture of fear and resentment, to be met with armed people standing in the street blocking them. They replaced the transformer, power was back on shortly. That was the day my dad said, "I guess when we hear hoofbeats, we should think horses, not zebras." I woke up to my bed vibrating, so I just assumed I left my phone on vibrate and someone's calling me. So I got a route around the bed to try and find it. I sleep with my phone cause I'm single as fuck. But I couldn't move. I tried, but I couldn't move an inch. I went to make a noise, but all I could muster was a guttural moan. I was lying on my side facing the door, and all I could see was the hallway light flooding into my room because I left it slightly open. Then suddenly I felt an arm slowly reach underneath me and grip me around the chest, and another hand reached over the top of my neck and cover my mouth. A leg reached over me and wrapped round my waist. Panic is really setting in by this point. I'm thinking, who the fuck is that? The next I could feel long greasy hair touching the back of my neck, and I could hear sweet nothings being whispered into my ear. I could feel the warmth of the breath in my ear as I just hear ramblings of a nonsense language. I felt ready just to let myself die just so I wouldn't have through another second of this. My heart was pounding out of my chest and I was sweating bullets. Then as quickly as it started, the hands loosen their grip from me and this thing crawls over me to get off the bed. It was a young girl with dark wet hair wearing a nightdress. Looked a lot like the one from The Ring. The most unnerving thing about her was the thousands of self-harm scars all over her arms and legs. She was covered in scars from head to toe. She disappears after crawling away from my line of sight, and finally, I could move again. I just calmly walked to the bathroom. I didn't want to cause a scene as there was other people sleeping in the house. I just stood in the bright light to feel safe for a second while I gather my thoughts on what just happened. I went downstairs to make myself a cup of tea while I researched what just happened on my laptop. I'm not one to believe in the supernatural, but I was so close to believing that night. Turns out it was sleep paralysis with hallucinations, my first and only occurrence of sleep paralysis. If humans have had this stuff happening to them for thousands of years, then I can totally understand why people of previous centuries were so quick to believe in the supernatural. In my house, my room, not master, is right next to the garage, so my window is probably 10 to 15 feet from my back gate. One night, I heard the gate shaking violently and dismissed it as wind until I looked at a tree that hangs into my yard, and didn't see any branches. I fell asleep with the light on, so assuming it was someone looking to break in or something, I jump out of bed and practically rip the damn cord from the fan fixture to turn the light off. Side note about the layout of my house: the back gate is right next to the side door for my garage. On my side of the gate, I jumped back into bed, and pulled my blanket up, thinking fuck as you would do, and that's when I heard the shaking ease. Then I figured they fucked off after not being able to get over. Well, until I heard that side door open, that is. I jumped out of bed, booked it to the other side of the house to my mom's room. I was about 12 to 13 at the time, and I was a massive bitch when it came to the thought of someone breaking into my house, trying to unlock her door and get her up as quick and quiet as possible. I started hearing what sounded to be someone slamming on the garage door, as if trying to get someone to unlock it. Then a few seconds later, the door opened. At this point, I give up all attempts of silence, and start banging on her room door, screaming they're in the house they got in. She jumps out of bed as I get ready to call 911, and surveys the house with our dog to see what the hell I was freaking out about. She checks the garage and outside, and finds nothing. She comes back inside to calm me down and get my story, where she tells me to just sleep in the living room for the rest of the night. The master bedroom is on the other side of a wall from the living room. Come to think of it now, it very well could have been an auditory hallucination or something, as I was experiencing similar occurrences of hearing people in my house talking. Either way, most terrifying thing I've experienced at this point in my life, so I hope this counts. One night many years ago, I was woken in the middle of the night to the sound that the lady makes in that movie The Ring. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a sound you could make if you open your mouth really wide and screech as deeply as you can. Sorry, I'm not very good at describing it. Anyway, I was absolutely frozen to the bed. I could feel the hair stand on the back of my neck and sweat dripping down my forehead. I was quite literally petrified. It was coming from the spare bedroom just across the hall from my room. I could feel my heart beating through my chest. I know I didn't say anything or make any attempt to move, and I know the sound wasn't loud enough to wake my so I am convinced that what woke him was the feeling of utter dread emanating from me. I'm a very light sleeper, whereas he'd sleep through a bomb. I'm actually getting goosebumps now even thinking about how scared I was. I have never ever been as frightened in my life, and I hope I never will be again, because I would probably just die on the spot. I was lying there waiting for the lady from The Ring to come through my bedroom door when my ode just asked out of the blue, "What's wrong?" I lay there still frozen. He turned on the light and asked again. I pointed at the door and said there was a noise. He got up to investigate. I was never so scared in my life. He came back into the room laughing his arse off at me. Turned out that this room that he had been doing a bit of DIY and had a little hole in it somewhere, so when he knocked the walls to make a walk-in wardrobe and hung the door, this little hole caused enough of a draft to move the door, which was making the noise. I've never heard a door make a noise like that, but he showed me and it was. Now that I've brought that memory back, I guess I might as well go downstairs because I'm not going to go to sleep now. Let me start by saying that for years and years I was a strict skeptic of the supernatural. Big old James Randi poster in my dorm room. I did not believe in the supernatural, in ghosts, in demons, etc. Then I moved into an apartment after college. Being poor, I thought I hit the jackpot when I found that this app was pre-furnished. Fridge, washing machine, and a free mattress with a sheet on it. Being a gross 23-year-old kid, I didn't take the sheet off for about a week. When I did, the entire right side of the mattress was stained light brown. Took me a long time to figure out it was a blood stain. Called the apartment agent. He said that the last tenant had died in the room. I asked why. They weren't allowed to discuss it, but offered to replace the mattress for free. In their defense, they purchased quite an excellent one for me. It was a few months later that things got weird. See, living in a room where someone died wasn't a big deal to me. Hell, I imagine most rooms older than 30 years have had someone kick it in them. But what did bother me was the night noises. At first, I could hear the distinct but ambiguous sound of air currents changing. You know the one. When it's like someone is walking by you, you can physically hear the interruption of an AC unit or vent. It unnerved me, but I just told myself that it was caused by something rational, maybe the way the air flows in the room occasionally created that sensation, etc. Then, I started hearing these loud popping sounds. Again, at first, I just assumed it was the apartment settling at night, but the sound was odd. It didn't sound like wood creaks or plaster. It was my floor. Weird popping sounds near my bed, always from the ground. While I was a little scared, I told myself it was just irrationality. When the lights go off, the human imagination can act strangely. More so than ghosts, I was worried that these were early signs of schizophrenia or something. That brings us to the last night I ever stayed in that apartment. It was winter, so I was using my heater to dry out some laundry inside my room. I hooked up a laundry line from the window to the closet, which is parallel to my bed. Mostly put up t-shirts and some jeans. In the night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to hear a noise. The clothes directly in front of my bed, where my head was, were moving. And then they dropped to the floor. And behind them, I saw something move. Just a shadow. 23-year-old idiot me put my blanket over my head, turned to face the wall away from the clothes, and just laid there until morning. I don't know what the fuck I experienced was. I find some comfort telling myself that maybe I slept walk, knocked the clothes over, got back in bed, then dreamed what I saw, but I think that's just me trying to feel better about what happened. I moved the hell out of that place the next day and paid a friend $500 to get all my stuff. A couple of years ago one summer, my dad and I loaded some camping gear onto the back of our bicycles and disappeared for a few days to ride around our state. Each evening about an hour before sunset, we'd start looking for somewhere off the side of the bike path where we could just slip away into the woods to set up our tent. On I think the second night, we found a little grass access road that crossed the bike path, connecting a farm field a ways off to the right to the small road to the left. We went down the road a little ways towards the girls and pitched our tent on the side of the grass road. We ate dinner, brushed our teeth, and went to bed shortly after sunset. Sometime in the middle of the night, we were woken up by a loud snorting sound outside of our tent. Every 20 seconds or so, we'd hear this thing heavily exhale through its nose. We were both freaked out. We started talking about it, hoping our voices would alert the animal of our presence and scare it off, but that didn't work. So we started talking louder, and then we just yelled at it to go away. Still heard the noise. I try shining my light through the wall of the tent before finally, I feed out of the tent and wave my light back and forth in the general direction of the noise. We didn't hear it anymore after that. I never saw it, heard it run away. I didn't even see so much as a pair of eyes glowing back at me. The next morning, we discussed it a bit over breakfast, and figured it was probably a deer that wanted to get from the woods into the farm field, but our tent was blocking its path. But whatever it was a fucking terrifying sound to be woken up by. It good only knows what hour of the night. I'm usually fairly sciencey and love the idea of the superstitious, but don't actually believe it truly exists in the way we think it does, aka ghosts, spirits, demons, etc. When I was growing up, I had a general food sensitivity to sugar, and that it made me overly anxious and antsy, especially at night when my mind would be running the gauntlet of dark room. There's definitely someone in here with you, or you can take your eyes off the dark closet across the room, but soon as you do, that's when something is going to come out of it that you'll see in your periphery and panic to turn a light on. I had a cat growing up who would sleep on my bed, usually between my legs, sometimes on my stomach, and even on nights when I felt that nervous anxiety of thinking something was there. I knew there wasn't, but I also felt like even if there was, my cat was in some way protecting me, and would feel more nervous if she wasn't sleeping with me. One night years ago I fell asleep with her on me and had a nightmare that I was being stalked by someone as I went through various locations in the dream, aka school, local park, dark building of some sort, until eventually I got home and thought the stalker was with me in my room, and I woke up in a panicked cold sweat. The room was dark, and my cat was staring into the darkness growling with her hair up. I've since been eating super healthy and have no problem sleeping in dark rooms, and have a new cat friend in my life who loves to sleep on my legs, and I don't have any major nervousness or anxieties about superstitious craziness. Eating healthy has made a giant difference in many facets of my life, and I love it. To this day I don't know who or what was in my room, but I'm convinced something was there. So I was out of town for work-related stuff. I had a hotel room to myself, and I was asleep just fine. I remember I was dreaming, but not what it entailed. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up, I think maybe due to being too hot or something, but I wasn't fully awake. I was in that state of mind between dream and reality, where hallucinations could occur. I opened my eyes and was facing the right side of the bed. On the left, I could feel something crawling into the bed with me. A creature of some kind. The only thing that went through my mind at that moment was, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It's going to eat me. I'm going to die. I started to yell, but because I didn't have energy to call up right away, it started out pretty meek, but my flight response kicked in and I leapt out of bed with incredible speed and sprinted in the pitch black of this hotel room, panicked, screaming at the top of my lungs, to the door. Still yelling, I fumbled for the light switch, but it only lit up the doorway, so I unlocked the door and stepped halfway out into the hallway and glared back at the bed I leapt from. I wasn't screaming anymore, but my entire body was shaky with fear. I just kept staring at my bed. It took me about 30 minutes of doing this halfway out into the hallway of this hotel before my brain could function normally again and register that whatever the fuck I thought was in there was a hallucination, and that I need to go back to sleep. I'll never forget that feeling of intense dread, that sense of impending doom that was conjured up from a fucking half-assed dream state. Like, give me a break, man.